Nobody Wants to Die is a cyberpunk noir detective tale in a rain-filled megacity where technology has made humans immortal. Developed by Critical Hit Games, it's an investigation game that presents an interesting story but light on action with big on mood. But the question, is the game worth your time? Well, if you want to find out, continue watching the video, give the video a like and give a subscribe to the channel. And let's get into the game.
Omega Code 112358. Suspected murder.
The story of Nobody Wants to Die is quite an interesting one. Set in the year 2329, technology has advanced so far it's allowed you to transfer your consciousness into another body, allowing you essentially to live forever. But only if you can pay for it. You see, by the age of 21, you get put onto a subscription service to withhold that body for the future. And if you can't pay it, that body gets given to somebody else and you get put onto the bank. So it's an endless cycle of always having to pay and reliving and being forced to live forever. We play as James Carter, a down-on-his-luck detective in the morality department who after some train accident is put on leave from the force and is also kind of get used to his new body. One day he's given an off-the-books case to get his job back. He decides to take it, and due to the type of case, he's partnered with police liaison Sarah to make sure he marks it down as an accident and basically gets the case over quickly. He arrives at the crime scene to find one of New York's elites have been murdered, and not only that, it's a final death, meaning that there's no coming back from this, which hasn't happened in forever. He quickly learns that this is no accident, and his investigation leads into a web of mystery, uncovering the truth about the elites, body subscription, and trying to find out who is murdering everybody and can he put a stop before he upheavals the entire government, or does he want to put a stop to it? And that's the story in a nutshell. And I will say this setting and the story are really super interesting. I love how far in the future it is, and it thinks about how our present has become the past and kind of forgotten. They don't know how cars rode on roads. They don't know about boats and the water. Heck, there's not even a real sun. It's all artificial. So the setting is a very super cyberpunk and super interesting. The noir feel drips from its setting, and it's really, really well done. And this whole idea about how technology has advanced so far that we can essentially live forever, and we've basically become gods. But at the same time, we've also become slaves to the system. We have to continuously pay to continue to live, and we are forced to pay that. We can't kill ourselves. We have to take really good care of our body. And if we don't, well, then you get put into the bank and you basically are kept in like isolation forever. It's a very dark, depressing story, and I kind of love this setting. The story and the mystery itself is also very interesting. You know, you arrive at the scene, you find one of New York's elites, not only a big major player, but the person that started this whole thing has been murdered, and it's a final death. And who is murdering all these elites, and how are they doing it? How are they getting past so much security, and what is the secret behind these elites and their connections to one another is really, really interesting. And what is the actual truth about this body subscription is all super fascinating. But the biggest issue is that the story and the setting isn't really upheld all the way till the end. First of all, let's talk about the world building, because I think this game has some terrible world building. You are never given exactly what is happening in this world. You know that there's some material that can take your brain, your consciousness basically, and basically transfer that into another body. That's one of the main things that the game really hits home. But there's so much stuff they talk about, how it happened and what's going on, that's never really given a full picture. Like, it's very vague. You're not really sure when did this start, how did they actually manage to get through this. We get to learn about something happening in the present day, like lowering the body age subscription, like from 21 to 20. You know, we learn that we're always a slave to the system, but there's never really a full-on indication of what exactly is happening, everybody's relationship with everybody else. How does the elites are different from the people that are working normally to those working at the slums to even Kara and the detective and the agency themselves. This game really needed a codex just for me to read so I can understand where we're situated in the world. We're always like trying to tell us a lot of stuff, but never really telling us exactly everything we need to know. And that kind of fails because this game is a choice-based game. And so you really need the world building and the setting to really be interesting and really be told to you so you can get into the characters. And the good thing is the characters are interesting. James is super interesting. He's a detective who's now lived for like 120 years, but he used to be a baseball player and he was really, really famous. But he then did something with this train accident which he has no memory of. He keeps seeing visions of his dead wife, and this is mostly also due to the fact he has desynchronization issues with this new body, who was a junkie and had lots of mental issues. So it's kind of having side effects on him as well. So he keeps seeing his wife, He always has these weird withdrawal symptoms. You know, it's very interesting what they do with him and how he decides to continue pushing the case even though people keep telling him no. Sarah at first is just basically the person that's like, oh no, I don't want to get involved in this, I don't want to do this, but eventually she also wants to find out the truth, and then she also has a secret that she's hiding, you know, as the game goes on. And again, that's really strong characters, but the world building just doesn't really hold up to it. The mystery itself also kind of falls apart around the end. There are so many plot holes when you get to the end of the game, you're like, how the heck does any of this very much happen? And that's the biggest problem, because you need the world building to be interesting, and so you need the mystery to also be interesting. And it kind of falls apart around the end. Also, like halfway through, Sarah becomes more of a focal point than James, which is, you play as James through the whole game, but it kind of feels like it becomes Sarah's story around the end of the game, where I didn't know how I felt about that, because don't get me wrong, she's an interesting character, but as the game goes on, you're like, we don't really learn a lot about like Sarah at all. Like, we learn certain things, but you really have to go out of your way to really find a lot of clues about the characters. And even then, you're never just given a full backstory on these characters. It's always very vague and you don't really know. Like, you get to learn something about Sarah's past and then you get brought up again much later. But if you don't ask that specific question, you won't get that question later on, because if you choose one choice in the game, it doesn't let you choose any of the others. There's only small moments where the game is like, yeah, you can ask about everything. And then other times where the game's like, oh, you can only ask about one thing, even though every single thing is very, very interesting. So overall, the story to me is just a mixed bag. I found it interesting at first, especially with the mystery, of course, and the setting, but it just never really plays out all the way till the end. The mystery becomes very much filled with plot holes at the end, and you're like, what? Even though the game has 3 endings, none of them are really good. I got the worst ending, and even when I watched all the other endings, I was still like, the game still doesn't really make a lot of sense when you get to the end of it. Like, so many plot holes, so many characters that just, like, especially one character that just out of the blue decides to betray you, and you're like, where did that come from? Like, that was never part of it. Like, the police chief seems to be this big character they talk about, doesn't really show up at all until like the end of the game, which is very, very weird. You know, overall a mixed bag when it comes to the tale. The mystery, the setting, all interesting, but it's not able to hold up when you get to the end of the game. So that's my take on the story. As for graphics, this game looks great. I mean, it even rivals AAA games at how the aesthetics is. It really does drive home the cyberpunk noir feel, and it does a good job at atmosphere. Really, some of the settings that the game has are really breathtaking and beautiful, and it helps with the sound effects and the music. The music is really good as well. I love a lot of it. It's a great atmosphere this game has. There are points in the game where you can sit and just look out the window and just stare, and I really love those moments. Like, this is sense of like calmness that the game has in this dirty, gritty world, but also beauty in a lot of it. Fantastic. Voice acting wise, I think everyone does a really good job. The person that plays James is fantastic. The person that plays Sarah is really, really good. Elsewhere, the voices are all okay. Overall, as a package, this isn't bad. This is actually really, really good. I like a lot of this.
Crusty old bastard. Why do you have to throw me off the case? Steiner's just trying to cover his own ass. Hide behind regulations, minimize damage, not solve the case. I thought he had bigger balls. Fuck. Learn something new every day, I guess. No doubt about it, this case smells worse than a 2-week-old corpse in a storm drain. So many victims. Who's really behind it all? I don't know his name, but I can already tell what kind of man he is.
So let's get into the gameplay. Now, this is a puzzle, detective, walking simulator type of games. You know, those ones that you play and then you walk around, click some clues, find some clues, and then, you know, do a puzzle here and there. And that's kind of what this game is. But there are a lot of like small things that do make this game a little bit more fun. First of all, when you do the actual like crime scene, when you go to investigate, you have to something called a reconstructor. And this basically is the main gimmick of the whole game, where you'll be going back in time, like rewinding time to see the events that took place that led to the eventual death of somebody. And so you're going to be rewinding time, fast forwarding time to look at interesting stuff and see where the clues line up. And then eventually you will create an entire picture of what happened before and then what led to the actual eventual death of that person or the explosion or what happened. This thing is very cool. I love the reconstruction, seeing how everything can play out, how fast you can make it, how slow you can make it. It's really, really well done. There's like a short mini game that you have to do that really isn't that interesting at all, where you have to like push the triggers to match up the timeline and stuff. I think that should have been taken out because it's not super interesting. There are a couple of other stuff that you use and gadgets that you have, like a UV light and an X-ray machine, stuff like that. Nothing else is super interesting than the constructor. Once you find all the clues, you then go back to your apartment and then you kind of do like a checkboard, like tick list to see which clue fits with what train of thought, and then you put that all together, and that's kind of how you complete the stuff. Otherwise, the rest is all choice-making games in the narrative, and that's really it. There's not really much else that you can do. You can walk around certain areas and click on small clues, but there isn't a lot there. And while I think this gameplay, it could be interesting, it's also kind of boring. There's not a lot going on here. You can't really mess up any of the crime scenes. The construction thing will always tell you where you need to look, where you need to go, so you're never really lost. There's always a hint system thrown in there. And even though you can walk around the area, click on everything to get small information, it doesn't really add anything to the actual like investigation at all. You don't even interrogate anybody because everyone is dead, so you don't even get any of that thrown in there as well, which is kind of disappointing. It does kind of become very boring when you start to figure out that the puzzles aren't really that interesting. The game really hopes that the story hooks you in and then you really want to find out what happens. This becomes an issue when you start to replay the game. The game has various different endings because you have different choices that you can make. And you have to go back and replay the game from the beginning all over again. And you got to see that, well, you can't really make that much changes to the story. Yes, there are decisions that affect the story, but you never know which decision actually changes the story because a lot of the story still happens exactly the same until you get to around the end of the game because it has 3 multiple endings. So nothing really changes, meaning you go back and replay the same stuff and get to the same conclusion over and over and over again. It's pretty boring, I have to say. It's not as interesting. While I think it's cool that you can rewind and fast forward time, I just wish that the game allowed you to maybe try to puzzle stuff together and do a little bit more than just, oh, rewind to this yellow point in the game, find the little like hub thing, look around, find the clue, and then you're switching to your X-ray, and then you're switching to your UV. Like that's the most thrilling part of the gameplay, is switching the UAV to switching to the X-ray and then go do the construction. Like that's really it. There's nothing else beyond that. Look, I'm not saying that it was going to be groundbreaking or super interesting, but the game does start to get kind of boring around the end of its run. Like after it's like it's only like 5 to 6 hours, so the game isn't that long, but it doesn't really keep your interest all the way till the end, and it kind of becomes boring when you get to the end. So the gameplay wise, it's not interesting, and I kind of feel like the puzzles just aren't interesting as well. This is worse in the replayability factor of it. When you replay the game, you start to see like, yeah, I really don't like the system as much as I thought I did. So overall, the gameplay to me is a mixed bag. I wish there was something more from it. You know, I just wish there was a little bit more that you could do in the investigations. Like you can find other things in the investigation, like click on this and click on that and examine every part of the room. But like that's just kind of world building, you know, just little small tidbits of information here and there. And the decision making stuff isn't as interesting. Like there's no reason to replay the game again because it's so boring to replay the game again. I replayed like halfway through the game, like 5 hours or 4 hours in, and then I was like bored. I was like, okay, this is just boring. Let me just check up the actual endings of the game because I couldn't make it through going through the same sections again. And you can't even remember what you chose because the game doesn't remember what you chose. So you're trying to remember what the hell did I choose here and there to make sure like this decision will change the effect of the story. And then you quickly find out it doesn't really change much at all. You're still on the same trajectory until you get to around the actual end that it actually changes. And you know how in other games you can ask like various questions to get more information? Not here. One choice, that's it. And then you're moving on, not really figuring out what's actually going on. I wish there was maybe more. Like I think if interrogations was in this game, like you could just do maybe one interrogation, might have at least changed the gameplay a little bit. Overall, a mixed bag and just not as interesting even over its short runtime.
Come on, move before they bust us.
Nobody'll even know I was here.
So, is Nobody Wants to Die worth your time? In my question, no. Look, the game isn't long, lasting you 4 to 6 hours at most. And while these games aren't long, and I'm not expecting a lot from them, what really needs to grip you with these kind of type of games is its story, and it really doesn't grip me. At first, I was very interested in the story and the world building and what they set in, but it quickly peters out and just isn't as interesting when you get to the end. And as for the gameplay, you don't need to have a lot of things happening when you have this short of a runtime, but you gotta at least make it somewhat interesting for me to play. And I quickly got bored of it around the end. The replayability factor also kind of sucks. You halfway through, you start to see that the game really doesn't make a lot of changes to whatever choice you make. So you kind of are on the same path. It's not like you get a brand new investigation or a brand new loop that goes completely somewhere else. You will always end up at the same place, which is the big park area, and you always have one or multiple things happen at that specific point. So nothing really happens that much. Look, if you want to pass like 6 hours and just play something that you don't really have to focus too much on, go ahead and do it. I recommend you play the game then. But overall, find something else to play. There are many games within this time frame that are way better. Heck, even replaying something before would be better than playing Nobody Wants to Die. It's not a bad game. It's just a pretty average, boring experience that I got out of it at the end. And when I got to the end of it, I was like, that really wasn't worth my time. I really didn't just spend playing the game. And I think that is its biggest failure. If you want to see more games, if you see one of more games that are worth your time, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and comment down below. Did you play this game? And what other games that you think should be, that are only like 4 to 6 hours long, should you actually play? Give me some recommendations. I would love to play some other games that are not super long and kind of like this length to compare this to Nobody Wants to Die. I'll see you guys in the next game.
Ask you something personal. Do you believe in life after death? Well, apparently in the past, people used to ask stuff like that all the time.
Because the average lifespan was less than 100 years.
And now, can we believe in anything beyond this? What if you could choose the bank or death?
We just received word of gunshots in Central Park! The crowd is panicking!
Sarah, you there?
All those innocent souls.
I will find you.
James? No, please.
Take you apart piece by piece. Who are you?
I've lost visual.
You should be thanking me.